It wasn't really that long ago when the former actor and Governor Ronald Reagan ran for president. I remember the talking heads huffing and puffing about why anyone would want an actor for president. Part of that might have been genuine, but he was also running on the Republican ticket. And even then, the national media was very liberal, though maybe they kept it less obvious than they do now. Looking back, it was quite a time. President Reagan dealt with a flat economy when he came in. At one point in the Jimmy Carter economy, people had 17% interest on their mortgage. I know that sounds hard to believe these days. People are shocked that we have 6 and 7. The American hostages had just been held for 444 days in Iran. And then, with the failed rescue of the hostages, a lot of people wondered if America's best days were all in the rearview mirror. But Ronald Reagan for president? Oh, he spoke well. You expected that from a trained actor. He had some basic ideas, core beliefs about what made this country strong. And in the end, they seemed to make a lot of sense. Similar to today, people were very sour with where the country had gone, like it is today, post-COVID. And while some of them have questions about Mr. Trump's methods for campaigning and maybe some tweets he sends out, they had no doubt that they were better off when he had his hands on the steering wheel. Much better economically, much better with their own personal safety, and better with U.S. leadership in the world. Ask about Ronald Reagan now, and there's universal praise. He played a strong hand. He got Mikhail Gorbachev to back down, and he pressed so hard on the communists that the Berlin Wall came down as well. He cut taxes. He let people do something that seems remarkable today. He let people have their own money in their pockets. Kind of seems logical, doesn't it? He didn't quite say that he'd make America great again, but that's exactly what he accomplished over his tenure in office. A wobbly and scared country was brought back to its very strong self. So here we are on the edge of another big choice, the return of the president who already showed us what he can do, and the Democrat vice president who's running hard and fast away from the 4 years that she and Joe Biden did when they ran the show. Well, one way to set it all up is to quote Ronald Reagan, who said, quote, "The trouble with our liberal friends is not that they're ignorant, it's just that they know so much that isn't so." In a moment, we're going to hear another quote from Reagan from one of his top aides. He's sitting right there next to me, Jeffrey Lord. Jeffrey, this presidential race is gaining speed. It's getting quite intense. But I think it's fair to say that even with Kamala Harris having picked her vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota, and now having gone through the joyous Democratic National Convention, we've had another big turn of events. RFK Jr., Bobby Kennedy, has endorsed Donald Trump and is pulling out of the presidential race. It's quite a story. It just never ceases to be a headline. So let's start with the last week or so and give us your perspective. What has happened in American politics that we need to know?
Well, it is amazing, Governor. And I got to tell you just one thing to start us off. The business about Ronald Reagan being an actor. And that was quite the issue when he first ran for office as governor of California. And his opponent, then incumbent Democrat Pat Brown, ran a commercial that said, "Ronald Reagan is an actor, pause, beat, and you know who shot Lincoln, don't you?" Meaning John Wilkes Booth. It did not go over well. It backfired, and Reagan won in a 1 million vote landslide.
So that's a great. I've never heard that before. What a great story.
So on we go with this, and one of the things that I find a real similarity between former President Trump and President Reagan is that they both had a show business background. Trump's unexpectedly, of course, he was in real estate and all of that sort of thing, but then he took over The Apprentice. And if you'll notice, he always uses the line, the key line there was "you're fired." And he now uses that line when he's discussing Kamala Harris or others. "You're fired." And it was quite the thing, I think. And he really, Reagan sat down for an interview with Tom Brokaw at one point, went long after he's been president. He's still getting towards the tail end of his second term. And Tom Brokaw says, you were an actor when you started out in politics. What's your belief as to how that worked while you were president? And Reagan replied without missing a beat, I don't know how I could have done this job without that background.
The economy is uncertain. You never know whether your money's worth as much today as it was yesterday. It's one of the reasons I buy gold from American Hartford Gold. American Hartford Gold has earned a 5-star rating and an A+ from the Better Business Bureau. Be sure to tell them Mike Huckabee sent you. They'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first qualifying order. Call 844-417-1010 or text Mike to 998899. You'll be glad you did business with American Hartford Gold.
He would put on that smile. He would warm to things. He had no hesitation. You had all kinds of people that thought he shouldn't say the Soviet Union was an evil empire. He went out there and said it anyway, because he understood the effect that this could have on the Soviets. And in fact, it did. And by the end of, a little after his second term, the Cold War was over. The Berlin Wall came down, the business of standing there. And that was another sort of dramatic story. This line had been put in his speech, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. And you had national security and State Department types who wanted it out. So it went in, it went out, went in, went out. So he is literally in the limo with my friend Ken Duberstein. We both were Franklin and Marshall College graduates. Ken at that point was chief of staff. They're headed to the wall for him to give this speech. He looks at the papers in front of him and turns to Ken and says, Ken, they took it out again. It's not in here. What should I do? To which Ken Duberstein, to his everlasting credit, looks the president right in the eye and says, Mr. President, sir, you're the president. Boom, back it went. And we all know the rest.
What a great story and a great reminder that, yes, Ronald Reagan was an actor, which meant that he knew how to communicate, which was one of his great, great attributes as president. But what people never gave him full credit for, he was an incredibly well-studied man. He knew what he was talking about. And he spoke with conviction, not about just something he heard someone say. He spoke with conviction about what he truly believed about America and about how to fix the economy. And I think that for all of us who loved Ronald Reagan, it's easy to look back and say he was a great president because he actually believed everything that he set to do. And your story about that line of the Berlin Wall, I've heard that before. And I find it just remarkable that so many of the establishment deep state actors, and they too are actors, but they wanted so much for him to be milquetoast, mushy mouth, don't take a stand. Thank God he never listened to those people. And he did what he felt like was the right thing to do.
Governor, I've written about this and gone back and taken a look. And it's very interesting, as then Governor Reagan was sort of on the rise towards what would become his terms in the White House. There you had establishment Republicans, and by name they included then Vice President Nelson Rockefeller, Senator Charles Percy from Illinois, Senator Jacob Javits from New York, and of course President Ford. And I have exact statements from them about how extreme Ronald Reagan was and how he would be the end of the Republican Party if he were ever nominated, because someone like that could never be elected. On and on and on they went. Suffice to say, history has not been kind to their thoughts on that.
I love that story because it's really a great parallel to Donald Trump. And there are still never Trump Republicans. I think some of them are just bitter that they aren't a big part of his inner circle. But what they really hate is that they don't control him. The consultant types, the donor class, Jeff, they're the ones that they've always run Washington. They're in charge. And it doesn't matter who comes, who goes. They're the ones who really pull the strings. These guys don't have anything on Donald Trump, and they hate his guts. I mean, they truly hate him because they don't control him.